text me. All this love I felt was a curse, I wanna exit. Going crazy, all of my nerves, who does to check me? I'm sorry, baby, why you gotta leave me on?
Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another tutorial here on the channel. And in today's video, we're gonna be learning the effect that I did in my recent montage. And if you guys go on and enjoy the tutorial, make sure you guys drop a like down below. It helps me greatly. And comment down below what tutorial you guys want to see next. And on that note, let's hop into After Effects. Alright boys, so now we are in After Effects, and once you've added your song and you've added your clip, you want to pretty much figure out 4 markers where you're going to be doing the poof effect. And the first marker is where he's going to be poofing, disappearing. The second marker is going to be the transition into the next part. The third one is poofing back in, and then the last one is the shot. And obviously you want the shot on like the key, beat in the song. The next step is pretty much figuring out where you want in the clip for him to disappear, and I would definitely recommend somewhere where it's not very busy in the background, because we're gonna be content aware filling the background or the character. It would definitely get the best result if there's not much going on in the background. And just like in this case, this is a pretty solid example where it'll pretty much content aware fill pretty good. And so the next step is pretty much we're gonna be cutting this layer, and we're going to be duplicating this layer. And once you've done that, we're going to be right clicking on that top one, going to time, and we're going to be freeze framing that frame. And once you've done that, you can actually double check, because sometimes when you freeze frame a frame, sometimes the time remap kind of jumps off. So definitely you want to check, and you can go to the bottom layer and click D, and you can definitely see how they have the same time remap time code. So that's a good sign. We only need this layer for right here, so we can actually go to this next marker and cut that and delete it. And we can go back to this, and this is where we're gonna be doing the content aware fill. So we're gonna be clicking up here on our pen tool, and we're pretty much just gonna be going around the character from the outside. You don't want to go too close to this, because this is gonna be content aware filling the character in, so you don't want that. So definitely just have like a rough cutout of the character, and I'll catch you guys in a second. So once you fully cut out your character, you can actually turn off this bottom layer, and we're going to be saving that for later. But as you can see, we have cut out the character, and we can go to that layer, do a little drop down, go to masks, and change this to subtract. And from here, this is where we're going to be doing the content aware fill. And as you can see, we already have it all pulled up. It will be on your right side, and we're going to be doing the alpha expansion on 3, fill method on object, lighting correction. Pretty much copy these settings, and before you click generate fill layer, we only need 1 frame. So what you can do is you can click B and then N, and it'll just content aware fill this 1 layer, and doing that will just make it go by way quicker. So after you've done that, we can click generate fill layer and let it do it magic, and bam. And as you can see, it did a pretty good job filling in the area, and that's a really good sign. And from that, we can actually open this back up, and we can go over to here, and as you can see, the generate fill layer it created is on top right here. And what we can do from here is right click, time, freeze frame, and we can actually drag this out to there, and we can actually put this right above our other layer. And from here, that layer that we turned off, we can actually put it on top, and we can turn it on. And as you can see, the character kind of pretty much disappears, even though it's the whole thing, it just the content aware fill is behind it. And from here, we can actually control C and control V our top layer and drag this over, because we're going to be needing that later. But for this one, we are going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be freeze framing it. So we're going to right click, time, freeze frame, and we can actually go ahead and name these, probably to help you guys out. So we can actually name this character, and then we have the fill layer, and then we have, and for the bottom layer, we can name it maybe background fill layer. Yeah, because that's super creative name. So after that, we can actually cut this here, and from here we can actually click on our character, and we can click T for opacity, keyframe that, click that stopwatch, and we can go ahead in the time maybe a couple frames, and then we can put that to 0, and as you can see, the character disappears. And from here, you can leave it just like this, or you can highlight it, right click, keyframe assistance, easy ease, and then we can go into our graph editor, and we can drag this over holding shift, and all this does is it goes out really quick, and then it kind of fades out really slow, and we'll just leave it like that. So once you've done that, we can move on to our next step, and that's figuring out where we want him to poof back in. And we're actually going to start with our poofing back in part. We're going to pretty much figure out where we want him to poof back in. This is totally up to you where you want your character to poof back in, but for this case we kind of want like a very like clear shot, and I believe just for the sake of it being very far for the keyframes, you kind of want as much as possible. So I believe we're gonna do like right there. From here we can cut that layer and get rid of this layer, and from here we can actually timer map this part, so we can click D and put a keyframe right there, and we're gonna figure out where he shoots right there, and we're gonna actually drag that to your shot keyframe. Here we can highlight them, right click, keyframe assistance, easy ease or F9, go into our graph editor, and this is gonna be a really slow build up, but it will work. So we can actually bring this up, and we want this one kind of just slightly like that, and then we can go down to toggle switches. Oh, it was already on there, that's really cool, and we can double click that for frame blending, and we can play this back.
Now it's who doesn't check me. I'm going crazy, y'all.
And that looks actually pretty smooth, honestly. And then we can just find another keyframe where we want the clip to end. Here's where we're gonna be putting another keyframe, and we can actually find a keyframe where we want him to stop. Boom. We'll go right here, put a keyframe, put that on our next marker, and then we can delete that, highlight it, go in our graph editor, and we can turn this up, and then we kind of want it obviously to be quick, and then a lot of just playing around figuring out what, so that's definitely way too slow. That looks pretty good. So once you've synced your second part of the clip, we can actually start with our next poof effect, and we're going to be content aware filling this first layer right here. So what we can do is we can click on the layer, Control C, Control V, and then we can right click, time, freeze frame, and then we can drag this over. Bam. Once done that, we can cut that layer, get rid of that, and we're going to be pretty much repeating the process for this first part. So we're going to be Control C and Control V that layer, and on that top layer we're going to be cutting out the character again. So a little pen tool around your character as best as you can, and I'll see you guys in a second. So once you've cut out your character, we can do the same thing on that bottom layer. We can turn it off just to see what we've done, and after you've done that, we're going to be clicking down the drop menu, going to mask, and going to add and putting it on subtract. And after you've done that, we can go over to our content aware fill, and A, before you click generate fill layer, we're going to be clicking B and then N on that frame, and then we can click generate fill layer, and it's pretty quick clicking on our generate fill layer, and we can actually drag this below the song, and then right clicking on it, time, freeze frame, and then we can drag this out. Control S to save your work like always. This bottom layer where it has the actual character, we haven't touched it, we can actually delete that because we're just going to be having them poofing in immediately. We're not going to have them fade in. So our next step is adding in our smoke cartoon animations / overlays, and I'll be leaving these two down below in the description if you guys want to use them. So we're going to be grabbing this smoke overlay and putting it above our first set of layers where we have them disappearing in this scene, and from here it's just a lot about just moving and scaling and opacity of the overlay to make it seamless. So what we can do is we can figure out how it looks when he starts to disappear. So we kind of want it start as soon as he starts disappearing. Yep, beautiful. And once he disappears, we actually want to grab this overlay and put it down here, and we actually play this back.
I'm going crazy, all of my nerves. Who doesn't check?
Click S for scale it up. I believe we want it a little faster.
Going crazy, all of my nerves. Who doesn't?
That looks honestly pretty good, but if you guys want to make the overlay go a little quicker, you can right click, go to time, and go to time stretch, and the smaller the value, the quicker your clip will go, and the longer the value, the slower it'll go. So what we can do is like maybe like 90 and make it slightly quicker. Control S, and we can see how that looks.
Going crazy, all of my nerves, who does it check me?
So as you can see, as that overlay comes in, he disappears, and that looks pretty beautiful. We can get rid of this part of the layer and cut it, delete it, because we don't need it. Bars. The second smoke animation, so we're gonna have a poofing in right there. So we can grab our second one and put it down right here, and pretty much that's where he's gonna be poofing in on this frame. So we want him to kind of be like right there, and then we want it to be right on the layer. Click S, scale it up, and from here just play it back, see how it looks.
My nerves, who does it check me?
And if we play it back, this is what we got.
I wanna ask you, going crazy, all of my nerves, who does it check me?
Now we can go to our pan and crop and adding in all our special effects. So what we can do is on that top layer of all of them, we can go to layer, new layer, adjustment layer, and we can zoom this in, and we want to start on that first keyframe, and we can go over to effects and presets and type in a transform. I guess I have to type in the whole thing, and bam, there it is. We're gonna grab it, put it on our layer, and from here we can do our pan and crop. So we want to keyframe the position and the scale, and we might play around with the rotation, but we'll just see how these go for now. After you've done that, we can click U to bring up our keyframes. From here we wanted to zoom in, and then right on that transition we're gonna have it zoom out, so we can actually go a little bit past that middle, and we can have it zoom in quite a bit, and then we can make, and we kind of want the position to be right on that character. Move it over like that, so get a rough estimate. Poofs away like that. Then right before the transition, you want to go one frame right before that keyframe, pretty much the last keyframe for this clip, and then we can have it zoom back out. We can go back to 100, see how that looks, and pretty much put these to default values. Put it back to 960, put this to 540, and then because we're zoomed in and then we're zooming out like this, on our next part we actually want this to be zoomed in, and then we can move this over like this, because we're going to be zooming up, so it'd be down like that. And this is pretty much the basics of how to do a transition, pretty much a zoom out transition. So we're gonna have it zoom out, and then it's gonna be zoomed in on this one, and we're gonna go ahead in the keyframes, and we can put these back to default values: 960, 540, 100, and it'll be pretty much a simple zoom out. It looks horrible right now, but don't worry, we're gonna be doing the easy ease and stuff. But from here, and then once we go into our poof, we wanted to zoom in. So what we can do is we can keyframe those, go ahead a couple keyframes, zoom in, and we obviously want it to be right on that character. So poof in right there, about right there. And once you've done all those keyframes, we can actually highlight all of them, click F9 to easy ease, and then we can unclick that, click on the position only, go into our graph editor, and we can go to our edit speed graph by right clicking, zoom in, and for this we want to hold shift, grab this one, drag it all the way over, and for this one we can drag it all the way over. And if you do, as you can see the influence is 100%, meaning it will just be super quick. And from here you can actually kind of drag it not as far back, and it'll be slightly a little more eased in. This set, we're actually going to drag it to the right, and then don't worry about this, you won't be able to see it because this frame goes straight to this keyframe, so don't worry about this little guy. But on this one we're going to be grabbing it, dragging it to the left, drag this one to the left, and then same thing for this one, we're dragging it to the left. And your graph should look something like this. We're gonna do the same exact thing for our scale keyframes. We're gonna highlight one of the scale keyframes, go into our graph editor, and you can do the same thing with the speed graph, or you can right click and go to value graph and do it this way. It's the same thing. It might be a little confusing that I'm doing both, but might as well teach you guys both. But from here, to mimic the same thing we did for the position, we're gonna hold shift, grab this bottom one, drag it all the way over, And for this top one, we're gonna grab it, drag it all the way over while holding shift. And for this one, we're dragging it to the right, and then this one to the right. Click on this guy, drag it to the left, and same thing for this one. Boom, boom, all holding shift. And that is what your graph should look like. And I totally messed up on this keyframe right here. This should actually be down, not up. So we can actually bring this one down here and go back into our graph, go to our speed graph, and make sure that it's just fully cranked to the left.
Going crazy, all of my nerves, who does it check me?
After you're done that, we can actually go onto our effects, and from here we can go up to layer, new, adjustment layer. And the first effect that we're using is just like a glow flash. In this case, I'm using exposure, and we're gonna be pretty much just putting these 3 keyframes right here, dragging this over because it's a little too big. And pretty much, yeah, it's just exposure, 1.14, 0 to 1.14, and then out to 0. And once you've done that, it's definitely a very subtle effect that you can kind of emphasize on the beats or just everywhere. It's a very good Control-C, Control-V preset. I'm sure all you guys know how to or use some sort of version of this. So the next effect we're gonna add is our blur, and we're gonna go to our effects presets. We're gonna be typing in blur, and we're gonna be using BCC lens blur OBS if we can find it. There he is. We're gonna grab it, put it on our adjustment layer at the top, and from here you can play around what, you know, how much blur you want. In this case, it's pretty subtle, so we only want like 5. Yeah, about 5. And then after you've done that, make sure you put the stopwatch on and click U, and then U again, and our keyframe will show up. And we're gonna go back a couple keyframes, put this at 0. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Put it at 0, and go ahead and pretty much we're gonna be putting this back at 0. And then we're gonna highlight them and clicking F9 to easy ease, Control S. And we want blur on Winnie POOFs. We want blur on the transition, and we want some blur Winnie POOFs back in. Next effect we can add is a little bit of radial blur for the transition, so we can type in radial blur, and if you have BCC you can use the BCC radial blur. It's definitely the best radial blur I always use. And once you've added that, we can actually go over to our transition, and in this case we can put the center to the original numbers as 960 and 540, so it's right in the middle. And then our blur amount, I usually do about 10 to 15 depending on the type of montage. And in this case, we're gonna do 10 and put 10 there. Click U and then U again, and then go back in our timeline, put 0. Go ahead a little bit, put this to 0. The next effect we can add is our S-shake wiggle, and in this case we're going to be putting our main S-shake amplitude. We're going to actually change this to 0.4 just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. And then we keyframe the first one obviously at 0, and then this last one obviously 0 again, and we can actually grab those keyframes. Pretty much what this S-shake does, it just gives it a little bit of a wiggle as he goes in. And then we kind of want that wiggle everywhere just because it's pretty subtle, and it definitely makes your montages look beautiful.
Going crazy, all of my nerves, who does it check me?
Alright guys, so that brings us to the end of the tutorial. Hopefully you guys learned something today, and if you did, make sure you guys drop a like down below and comment what tutorial you guys want to see next. And I'm definitely still trying to get better at recording tutorials. Hopefully you guys were able to follow along, and I love you guys. Thanks for all the support, and I'll catch you guys next time.